Find Me, the air quote sequel to Call Me By Your Name, divided fans of Call Me By Your Name on a massive level. People either loved it or they hate it. Many were disappointed that it wasn't really a sequel, but that's kind of the point. It's not meant to be a sequel, and this is why it's not a sequel. Call Me By Your Name is a beautiful book, and one you cannot replicate. And I think a lot of the people that wanted the sequel to Call Me By Your Name had only seen the film, which I think is tragic because the book is gorgeous in its own right. The book and the film of Call Me By Your Name end at very different points. The end of the film is the end of summer, where Oliver goes home, and the phone call, and the scene in the fireplace, where the book ends on a flash forward. Decades later, they meet each other again, they talk about it, and it leaves you want to know, will they get back together or won't they? That's the point. In the book, Call Me By Your Name, Oliver and Elio have had their big reunion. They've had that moment together, and it leaves you on that cliffhanger. Find Me presents a different story. A lot of the book takes you on a journey with Elio's father, who in his own right was a fascinating character with a lot of subtext. He's recently divorced and sitting on a train. His story is just as interesting. The story of the father of Elio takes you on a different journey completely. He meets a younger woman and obviously falls in love. You know, rebound girl. But when we meet Elio, he's living with his partner and is now a famous composer and works in the music industry in the classical sense. And Oliver is the New England lawyer. He's that person. And you do get a reunion between Oliver and Elio within Find Me, but their reunion kind of takes place in the middle of the timeline. So the timeline of the books is skewed. The end of Call Me By Your Name takes place after Find Me. Find Me presents you on a different story. It's like a sub-story, a side story, a story from a different perspective. And often that's lacking in fiction. I think people wanted Elio and Oliver to meet years later, run into each other's arms and fall in love. But it doesn't always work that way. First love doesn't always work that way. And sometimes people are flawed and they're not perfect. I think the marketing behind Find Me was wrong. I've said that for a long time. But it's genuinely not a sequel. It is a side story. It's that bit in the middle. And sadly, I think so many people just wanted the film, wanted a sequel to the film, to see that big reunion and see them fall into each other's arms, and it doesn't work that way, not in real life. Elio and Oliver represent that summer romance, that first love, that person that we meet, that person that gets under our skin, that stays with us for a very long time. And Elio and Oliver are two characters that are forever interlinked. At the end of Call Me By Your Name, it leaves you on that cliffhanger. Find Me is a middle story, and I think people wanted more of Elio and Oliver, but when really their story is done. Their story has moved on. They are not who they were. With the father in his divorce and his life and what he's going through, the relationships of Elio and his partner, and even Oliver's are touched upon. Oliver is married, kids, and the typical guy, I suppose. But you have these characters, their intertwining lives, and how they've moved on with their lives. They are not the people from there. Elio is no longer 17. Oliver is not 22. His father is single, divorced, and a middle-aged man. The relationships between these people are fundamentally complicated and deep. And that's why this is not a sequel. You can't read this as a sequel and think, oh, well, this is how it should have been and this is what it should have done. But people, if you've read the book, and by the way, the audiobook of Call Me By Your Name is special, they have their reunion. And if you studied the timeline, you would find it interesting to see that. The person we meet, our first love, the person that we date when we're 17 is not the person we're going to spend the rest of our lives with. And it's very true. I mean, my first boyfriend, I would never have spent my life with him. But this book is beautiful. It's flowery language. It's beautifully descriptive. And Find Me packs an emotional punch. The difference being is it feels more real. The dreamlike surrealness of Call Me By Your Name is carried through, and you have those moments where everything feels like a daydream, a memory of a summer, a memory of a moment. Okay, there's no scenes with defiling peaches, but there is definitely some fruit play going on. Google figging. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But this is fundamentally a beautiful book, a continuing story, not a sequel. Those moments with those characters and side notes. When Elio and Oliver's story has basically been told, the story of the father, an interesting story of a newly divorced man, a newly single man, is the interesting story. You have their lives and their interlinking moments and those things that bind them together forever. Characters that will forever be in our hearts and our minds and our psyche, but characters that are real, and that's where the writer's strengths are. He writes characters that feel relatable and real, and I've read this writer's work page from page to page, and it's beautiful. It's a shame that people beguiled this and dismissed it. A lot of people were angry and that called it a cash-in. But if you studied it and went in there, you realised that people wanted a fantasy where his characters reflect the real nature of love, life, loss, and who we are, where we're going and what we're doing. His characters, the way he writes, reflects these fundamentally flawed people who aren't perfect. So, Find Me is not the sequel to Call Me By Your Name, more a continuation of the story within that world, a different story that's been told, and a story that not only echoes reality and how things actually are, but it also echoes the cycle of life and death itself. So, tell me what you think in the comments below. As always, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.